Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the third part of the ultimate childhood trauma iceberg. Let's get into it. I know it can be pretty hard to sit through a 45-minute long video, so I'm going to try and cut these in half and make them about 15 to 20 minutes for you guys so they're a lot easier to digest. But let's get into this. First up on this list, we have animals having sex in zoos. Now, this one's pretty self-explanatory. Monkeys doing monkey business isn't pleasing to watch for anybody of any age group, but if you're a kid and you have no idea what you're watching or what's going on, and even worse, if you ask your mom or your dad afterwards what the hell was going on, that's going to be a nightmare for the parents to have to explain it. From a kid's perspective, it could look like they're fighting, I guess. Other than that, we know why this is here. Next up on the list, we have Arnold's head freezes in space. The Magic School Bus was one of our favorite shows growing up, and in the very first episode, the pilot episode, they led with this. A lot of people speculate that Arnold died in the first episode. This is because Miss Frizzle thought it would be a good idea to take the class on a road trip to Pluto. Now, she initially promised that, don't worry guys, it would be just a quick stop and then we'll be on our way. Sadly, when she got there, she was like, damn, this is pretty comfy, I kind of want to stay a while. And Arnold freaked out. Of course, throughout the entirety of the Magic School Bus series, Arnold is the paranoid kid, and in this episode he's no different. So after Miss Frizzle says that she wants to stay a little bit longer, Arnold, out of spite for Miss Frizzle, says, you want to see what will happen if we all stay here? And he lifts off his astronaut helmet and his head turns into a popsicle. His head turns into a giant ice block. Of course, this is enough to make Miss Frizzle and the class hop on the school bus and go back, but this is the first episode of this series. This is what they led with. This is the pilot episode. And apparently, watching a kid potentially die in outer space was a little bit too much for the child audience that they were trying to promote this to. Next up on this list, we have Bambi's mother getting killed. In 1942, Disney released the film Bambi, and in this film, there's a very notorious scene where Bambi and his mother are out searching for food. While they're doing this, Bambi's mother is shot by a hunter that's just off screen, and oh my god, is this a dark scene. Bambi's mother then bleeds out in front of Bambi and eventually dies. Until this point, Disney was not known for having these dark and deep scenes in their movies. When unsuspecting parents brought their children to watch this movie in the theater, this was the first time a lot of them had experienced parental death. And to this day, a lot of people claim the scene was so shocking that it has stuck with them for almost a century. That's right, this movie has almost been out for a century at this point. Next up on this list, we have the game franchise Call of Duty. Now, not only is Call of Duty the first game series a lot of kids experience violence in, but the zombies game mode in particular was probably the most disturbing to most children. This includes disturbing scenery of undead individuals following you around and trying to kill you. The game mode itself was quite punishing and difficult, which just added to the stress factor of these guys constantly coming after you. In the early days of Call of Duty, a lot of people also attributed violence done by kids to people playing these violent video games. For example, at the time, school shootings were starting to become a lot more common, and a lot of parents and authoritative individuals said that a big reason why kids could be, producing these violent tendencies could be because they're learning from these violent video games. And now that we're a lot more well-versed with mental, issues and disabilities and stuff like that kind of go unchecked and lead to these outbursts of violent tendencies. But at the time, people had no idea why these things were happening or why anybody would commit such a terrible act. Next up on this list, we have Cletus Cassidy, or the character Carnage. Cletus Cassidy is a deranged, sociopathic serial killer and mass murderer who bonded with an alien symbiote to become the notorious supervillain Carnage. Following a dark and disturbed childhood which culminated in him burning down an orphanage, Cletus became a serial killer and was eventually convicted for 11 consecutive life sentences. Now, how he actually connected with the symbiote was while in jail, he became cellmates with the other very popular symbiote, Eddie Brock, who had bonded with Venom. And these symbiotes can reproduce asexually. Now, the asexually produced symbiote made by Venom would eventually become Carnage. Next up on this list, we have Syriac. Syriac is a YouTube channel created in March of 2006 that is packed full of uncanny and unsettling animations. With each animation containing an array of different alien-like creatures, there's no wonder a kid stumbling across this in the early days of YouTube would not be scarred a little bit. Next up on this list, we have DeviantArt. This one's still terrifying to me, for those of you that don't, and I feel like that's the same for a lot of people that are watching this video. DeviantArt is a community website where you can post your art, no matter what form it takes. Meaning, even the individuals with the most disturbed minds can post whatever they would like, with little to no restrictions involved. A drawing of any animated character you can think of, regardless of how attractive they are, with humongous anime milkers? You bet, baby, cause that's art. You know what? I'm a grown-ass man, and I don't even want to stumble around on this website. One too many clicks, and I won't ever want to touch the internet ever again. Next up on this list, we have Disc 13. Disc 13 is a disc from the video game Minecraft, which, just like every other disc, plays an audio sample when you put it inside of a jukebox. This audio sample, in particular, is significantly more unsettling than the others. The Minecraft wiki itself explains it as a somewhat unsettling ambient track consisting mostly of cave noises, metallic clinks, splashes, wind blowing, and muffled bow firings. Next up on the list, we have the TV show, The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack. The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack is a cartoon that aired on Cartoon Network from 2008 to 2010. The show follows a boy named Flapjack and his best friend, Captain Knuckles, as they get into strange predicaments and misadventures. Going back to watch this show now as an adult, the animation style that they used was almost gory at some times. It was very graphic for a lot of the different scenes, and I could definitely see why this could be unsettling to a kid. The show supposedly was canceled in 2010 because it, quote, didn't match with its new lineup of shows for a young male-targeted demographic. But many speculate the real reason is because the realistic art style used in the show was too disturbing for the younger male audience that they were targeting. Next up on this list, we have Frank the Robot. Frank the Robot is a giant robot that appeared on the cover of Queen's 1977 album, News of the World. The robot on the album cover holds the bodies of Brian May, the guitarist, and Freddie Mercury, the lead singer, while the other two band members, John Deacon and Roger Taylor, fall out of its grasp. The blood of the band members can also be seen on the hand of the robot, insinuating the robot is responsible for their deaths. The actual design and artwork of the robot itself is also very disturbing. No wonder kids found this disturbing when they were browsing around in the CD store with their mom and saw this. Next up on this list, we have Freddy Krueger's Kills. As a being who can manipulate dreams, Freddy twists reality, blurring the lines between imagination and terror. His signature weapon, razor-sharp blades attached to his glove, often lead to drawn-out, agonizing deaths, with victims tortured before they meet their end. These deaths occur in a world where the rules of reality don't apply, making them unpredictable and surreal. The idea that Freddy can invade a child's most private space, their dreams, and use that vulnerability to terrorize them would make the situation especially unsettling because you take away any sense of safety. The sheer violence coupled with the surreal horror would create a chilling atmosphere too intense for young minds to even process. Next up on this list, we have Frybo from the TV series Steven Universe. Frybo is a creepy sentient mascot costume that is brought to life by an ancient corrupted power. His moves are jerky and unnatural, and the thought of an inanimate object coming to life, an inanimate object that you could be stuck inside of, is more than enough to terrify a child. We already spoke last time about how mascots can be so terrifying to children because they're so lifeless and emotionless. And the fact that during this episode, they had one of them come to life, and not only did it come to life, but it was evil with bad intentions. I think the thought of an inanimate object that, in most scenarios, couldn't interact with them is now dangerous and can hurt them. That, I think, is where the true terror comes from. Next up on the list, we have Godzilla from 1954. Now, a lot of sources that I did research on mentioned that the potential fear from this film could come from the thought of Godzilla's devastation to the city of Japan being similar to that of nuclear warfare. And of course, during the 50s, everybody was terrified. It was like post-war anxieties, PTSD, and seeing these feats of mass destruction, leveling cities out, would resurface these memories of the war and then instill fear into you again as if it was the war going on. Although, yes, that can be absolutely terrifying for a child, that is more of a adult perspective where you understand what's going on and you've seen the destruction and you know why the destruction is happening. Kids obviously understand the fear of this situation, but they don't understand why things are happening. Where if a kid were to watch this, they would just see a giant salamander lizard thing, tearing apart their city. That would be enough to instill fear into them. You wouldn't have to have all these underlying fears and metaphors about the war. Next up on the list, we have, I think, my favorite while I was doing research for this. We have the Humpty Dumpty Kinder commercials. The Humpty Dumpty Kinder commercial refers to a series of ads for Kinder chocolate products particularly released between the 1980s and early 1990s, where the character Humpty Dumpty was used in a fun and playful context, usually interacting with the Kinder products. A lot of people mention that the reason why this one could be terrifying to kids is because in the original Humpty Dumpty nursery rhyme, he's a lovable character that is destined to have a terrible fate. He is destined to fall off the wall and, crack his egg open, and it's supposed to be a terrible thing, and it's always going to end in a sad story. But that was before I saw this humanoid egg-ass motherfucker. And I'm like, I know what's scaring the children. I don't have to look for the metaphors. Look at this guy. This is not Humpty Dumpty. You could not come up with anything better than this. This is terrifying. This is nightmare fuel. This is the kind of stuff that people on YouTube, like the super uncanny animators, are making their characters look like. This is so out of pocket. What were you thinking? This belongs on Adult Swim, like past midnight, so a kid can never lay eyes on whatever this abomination is. Next up on this list, we have two entries that can kind of go hand in hand. We have the unmasking of Jason Voorhees and the kills of Jason Voorhees. Now, I think these ones intertwine really nicely together, so I'm gonna try and talk about them as if they're one. First of all, Jason Voorhees is an unstoppable killer. He has no mercy, no remorse, and most importantly, no reason to kill. Now, what I think makes the unmasking so terrifying is that not only in every single film that he's not wearing his notorious hockey mask is he like grotesquely deformed and ugly and has tumors and like scars and like everything terrible you can think about, but you're seeing the face of one of the greatest murderers in history, and the fact that you even, get to see this unmasking of him already has kind of like sealed your fate. Like, imagine if you were there with him. If you're close enough to see his ugly ass face, that means you're pretty much dead already. And to go along with that, the kills. He's often using a very primitive weapon, one that will tear you up into pieces, like a machete or an axe, or even his bare hands. He will make it brutal, he will make it bloody, he will make it gory, and there's nothing you can change about that. The second thing I think that could be really scary about the kills is the unexpectedness. Usually the victims are in a vulnerable situation. They're swimming, or they're sleeping, or they're hanging out, and this guy bursts in the door and starts chopping people to pieces. It makes you feel like even in your safest environments, you don't feel safe. And first of all, I don't think a kid should be watching Friday the 13th anyways. But if they are, there's so many reasons why it's scary for everybody of every single age demographic. And I can definitely understand why kids fit into that fear factor, especially. Next up on this list, we have Jimmy Neutron, Happy Family, Happy Hour. And no, that is not the name of an episode. That is an animation that was uploaded to the Seinfeld Spitstain YouTube channel in August of 2013. It is about as fever dreamish as you can make a YouTube animation. It is so crudely done and like almost to the point where it's comical. The lore, I guess, of the animation is Jimmy Neutron's dad kills Jimmy's mom and then holds Jimmy at gunpoint and forces him to have father-son bonding time with him, and they order a pizza, and it is just... And then the pizza man comes and decapitates him with the pizza. It's just so bizarre and otherworldly, and my words are not making sense right now because the animation doesn't make sense. So if you really want to see what I'm talking about, feel free to go watch this video. If a kid was like, oh, I love Jimmy Neutron, I'm going to click on this video, it's going to be so fantastic, and then they come into whatever this is, there's nothing gory or like, visually disturbing about it other than just how unorthodox everything is. But if a kid just clicked on it thinking it would be something fun and was met with whatever this abomination is, then I would be pretty like messed up too. And finally, on this list, this is the timing couldn't have been more perfect for when I had to cover this on the channel. We have John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. I actually recently watched this movie, this exact movie, for my birthday a couple nights ago. And I love it to death. And I chose that I wanted to watch it because it's one of my all-time favorite movies. And it's been one of my all-time favorite movies for a very long time. A couple things. I don't want to ruin anything. If you have not seen this movie, please go watch this movie. There's a reason it's one of my favorites. It is so extremely well done, especially for the time frame when it was released, and they didn't have super advanced special effects and everything. Everything is practically done. It is the gore, the abomination that is the thing, the makeup, everything is so incredible. Please go watch this movie if you haven't already. But I think the reason why it's terrifying for everyone, including kids, and still including me, after I've seen this movie so many times, and I'm a grown-ass man, is because they do an immaculate job at building suspense and building tension throughout the entire film. For those of you that don't know, The Thing is a shapeshifter of sorts. It can copy organic materials, meaning that it can be anything or anyone that it wants to be. And there's a group of scientists out in Antarctica that are on a research expedition, and this thing literally happens to stumble upon their camp, and it's just like, you don't know who to trust anymore. You don't know what's even human anymore. Near the end of the film, they start to question if they're even human, because there's so much stress involved. Thinking that, these people that you think are your friends or have been your friends for such a long time are no longer your friends. They're not those people that you've known for the last 10 years. That is such a terrifying feeling. And there's movies you watch, and especially horror movies, where you're like, oh, I know what I would have done in that movie. I know what I would have done to get out of that situation. I wouldn't have stuck around in a house full of serial killers. I would have grabbed a weapon instead of just walking blindly into that dark room. In this kind of situation, what can you do? Those are the best kind of movies. You can't do anything. The characters themselves try their hardest to do whatever they can. And if you were put in their shoes, there's very little you could do differently. You're in the middle of Antarctica. There's no rescue team coming for weeks. You don't know who to trust. You're stuck with the same people that you've been stuck with this whole time. What are you supposed to do? Anyways, if you can't tell, I'm obviously passionate about it. And the reason why I am so passionate about it is because it's so damn fantastic. So please go watch this movie if you haven't. I could just talk about this one movie forever, but that's the last entry on this list. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you guys stuck around long enough to hear me ramble about one of my favorite movies. Remember that you guys are amazing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.